Water and land resources are essential to production of the products we consume. For dairy, without land for feed production, there is no dairy production that can go on. If it does not rain, there is again no feed production, hence no milk production. Land and water footprints look at both direct and indirect water and land use of a process, product, company, or sector, and includes resource consumption and pollution throughout the full production cycle, from farmer to the tables of consumers. The water and land use are assessed over the production cycle of the animal. For dairy, this is over the lactation cycle of a cow and is then expressed as the annual amount for standardization of the estimates. The water footprint measures the amount of water used to produce each of the goods and services used in dairy production. It is usually measured in cubic meters per ton of milk produced. The water footprint has three components: green, blue, and gray. Together, these components provide a comprehensive picture of water used by delineating the source of water consumed, either as rainfall, soil moisture, or surface groundwater, and the volume of fresh water required for assimilation of pollutants. The largest proportion of water used in the livestock value chain is linked to the production of the feed that the animals consume. Water that is drank by the livestock, washes the animal stalls, or other dairy facilities along the chain mostly contributes to between 2 to 10% of the total resource used. Land use within a zone system is estimated based on the land used for domestic production of the feed consumed by the cow. For dairy production, focus is mainly on grassland or cropland used, as these two land types are essential in meeting the dairy production needs. Land footprint is measured in hectares of land used per ton of milk produced. Both resource indicators are determined by 1. The feed consumed per animal. 2. Zone-specific milk and crop yields of both the cow and the feed crops. And 3. Whether the feed crops are produced locally or imported from other zones. The feed types in dairy production are mainly pasture, which includes hay and silage, planted forage, crop residues, and compounded feed and supplements. The proportion of these feed types in the daily rations of the cows varies depending on the dairy production practices. Assessing the water and land footprint in agriculture. The two indicators allow us to answer a broad range of questions in agriculture. In dairy production, the aim is towards improving production and ensuring that producing milk on the farms does not deplete the water or land resources in the area. Some specific questions that can be answered are: how can this approach help in land use planning? By identifying areas where production can be carried out more efficiently, and therefore lowering the negative impacts on land and water resources, and ensuring good overall ecosystem and human health. Which additional stakeholders can be targeted other than farmers? For instance, regulators such as water and land boards who would like to know how well regulations are protecting the water and land resources under their jurisdictions. If the regulations best captures the agricultural requirements in the areas they oversee. At a broader scale, it is possible to estimate the total consumption of the water and land resources within a region, e.g., a river basin, a country, or globally, that is focused on milk production by use of these two indicators. The water or land footprint amounts would then be able to help us understand where exactly our limited freshwater or land resources are being consumed and polluted. For example, the greater impact is felt when water resources are consumed in seasons or regions of scarcity. For land, this is witnessed when there is a drive to produce feed on land that is already dedicated to production of food for human consumption in many arable areas, like the highlands, or for nature, as in forested areas. This will then determine the actions to be taken in averting crises or ensuring minimal impacts on the resource base and the environment. Overall, this information is important in making sure that milk production is sustainable, that the ecosystems within which this is carried out are able to function well, and that biodiversity is maintained at recommended levels. Also, that other users of resources are not denied the resource due to overconsumption of the water and land resources by dairy production. For farmers, this would mean the improvement of their production practices to include, for instance, intercropping. proper management of manure from farms, good animal husbandry to minimize wastage, and proper use of water resources if they are channeled to the farms for irrigation, so as not to abstract more than what one is allocated. For extension workers and policymakers, the message would include looking at a collection of farmers in a region and ensuring that the land and water resources are allocated equitably. This will ensure that protected areas for nature and other environmental or ecosystem services are maintained, while also providing for the optimal production of milk.
Yes, welcome everyone to the third dialogue on agroecology and agrobiodiversity. This dialogue is being hosted by the Intersectoral Forum on Agroecology and Agrobiodiversity, ISFA. And ISFA is working towards mainstreaming agroecology, biodiversity and ecosystem services in the agriculture sector and landscapes. The forum mainly aims to provide a platform through which stakeholders at the intersection of biodiversity conservation and agriculture production can interact to discuss, share knowledge and information, influence policy, fundraise, implement joint programs, and also monitor and review progress of the actions. So I'm Bob Aston. I'll be your moderator for today. So first, please note that we are recording this dialogue, but at the same time, we also streaming live through our ISFA YouTube channel, and we also encourage you to tweet using the hashtag Agroecology and Agrobiodiversity Dialogue. And the floor will be open for contributions in line with today's topic. And so as we start, first we'll just do a 2-minute icebreaker, which we've shared on the chat. So because today we are talking about linking dairy intensification to water and land use, we just want to do a 2-minute icebreaker. We look at if you woke up tomorrow and found yourself involved in dairy production, what will you start with? So you can check on the chat where we've shared the link. Just click on the link that we've shared on the chat. If you woke up tomorrow, and you find yourself, involved in dairy production, what will you do or start with? So just click on the link that we've shared on the chat, but at the same time, you can also, on your mobile browser or your laptop browser, just go to slido.com. Then when you ask for a code, you'll input the code 621653. So at least we've heard from one person, learn how to make cheese. If you woke up tomorrow and found yourself involved in dairy production, what will you do or start with? So we already have learned how to make cheese. Just click on the link that we've shared on the chat. I'll again share the link. Yes, look for extension officer. Learn how to make cheese, ensure water availability. At least we have feedback from 3 people. If you woke up tomorrow and found yourself involved in dairy production, what will you do or start with? So first we have ensure water availability, look for extension officer, and learn how to make cheese. Just click on the link that we've shared on the chat. But if you're using your phone, you can also just go on your mobile browser, whichever browser you're using, just go to slido.com, then you input 621-653. Ensure water adequacy, establish enough fodder and make sure there's water available. Ensure I have enough feeds and water. Get a cooler. Ensure water adequacy. Find favorable market for milk. Ensure I have enough feeds. Go and milk my cows. Get market linkage, proper housing. So those who have not tried, just click on the link that we've shared on the chat. But if you're not able to click on the link, just on your mobile browser, go to slido.com. Then when you ask for a code, you input 621-653. Then you can be able to add your input. At the same time, you can also be able to add more than one entry. So even if you've shared your input, you are still able to add another entry. Get market linkage, grow various fodder to make food from home, develop the dairy production plan, prepare a plan for the day, find other farmers engaging in similar activities, liaise with other dairy farmers, seek expert advice, drink milk, seek expert advice, liaise with other dairy farmers, prepare a plan for the day, find other farmers engaging in similar activities, learn from other dairy farmers' experiences. So I think we'll stop there. You can still be able to add your input, but I'll stop sharing. So thank you for your feedback. So now I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Caroline Bosire, who will take us through today's third ISFA top dialogue on linking dairy intensification to water and land use. So Dr. Bosire is an ecologist and has a background in chemistry, zoology, and conservation biology. She has worked in the wildlife and environmental conservation field, and also on innovation systems in livestock production. She's currently engaged in the food safety and also and the nutritional outcomes associated with providing animal source foods to children and pregnant women. Her presentation today will mainly focus on the linkage between research in dairy production and the environmental impacts associated with highly dynamic livestock production systems in Kenya. So the focus will be in the innovative field of water and land footprints in livestock production in Kenya. So kindly, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Caroline Bosire. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. It's nice to be presenting on this day that has finally become warm. The topic of my presentation focuses mainly on dairy. And what I intend to do is to show how dairy production cuts across the agroecological practices and how it also interacts with biodiversity conservation, as was seen from the video that was played. The contents of the presentation, I'll do a brief introduction. I'll introduce to you how efficiency in the dairy systems is assessed, and then what factors that were found to be determining efficiency in the dairy system, and I provide a brief conclusion on the important factors to focus on. Next. We know for animal source foods that it's estimated to grow, especially in the least developed regions of the world. If we look, for example, at beef and milk, we see the high income countries that growth in the consumption of beef and milk does not change so much towards 2030. But if you look at the developing countries like Sub-Saharan Africa, China, and the East Asia Pacific region, we see that, for example, beef is estimated to grow by around 150% in the Sub-Saharan African region. And if we look at milk, if we look at China, they estimate that it would grow by about 250% by 2030. Next. Next. On this backdrop, we know that total amount of water that is used in the total demand for fresh water, especially, is about 90%, and this is focused in agriculture, with about a 31% contribution for livestock production. And land also contributes a lot to agricultural production, and then it's influenced mainly by humans to the extent of 83%, and this is mainly towards agriculture. These two resources are key in providing agricultural ability of water is per capita is really reducing, and we are moving towards an era of high scarcity by around 2050, where we see world population really outgrowing the capacity of water resources to maintain their needs. Next. So the big question is, will this growing demand for livestock commodities will be met? How will we meet this? Next. There's 3 possible options that are proposed to meet the growing demand on livestock product. One is to meet it through importing the livestock products from areas where the production is higher and more efficient. A second option is meeting it through importing the industrial know-how of livestock production. This is in what some people term as technology transfers. And the third option is meeting the demand by transforming smallholder livestock systems. And this is by directly influencing the farmers. Next. So why a focus on dairy, especially for this production, and considering the background of milk, of growing demand for animal source foods? It's because for milk production, it's a highly prevalent practice in Kenya, and it's been determined to be viable economically. However, this practice is often constrained by the availability of resources to produce. These are both natural resources and economic resources, which are And also this system, the dairy production is always invested in, not highly invested in, except in very intensified systems and only mainly in regions which are have high production. And in these dairy systems, there's also low responses that are faced by farmers. Next. Next, please. Okay. So from the options we saw, and from the growth in demand, we see there's a need there will be an increased demand, that therefore the farmers would be needed to increase their production to meet the demand. However, there's a requirement for this to be sustainable. We see this in all the SDGs, especially 6 and 13, where you need to meet increased production within limits, so that the natural resources are used efficiently and farmers are able to be economically empowered as they engage in the activities. So sustainability to meet the requirements, the improved dairy production will be determined by the degree of intensification, and also in which areas, the agroecological regions in which the production is being undertaken. While you're also ensuring this increased production, there is also a need to ensure that the cost of production and the efficiency of the use of resources is within the limits that are placed on the resource use. Next. So how would we make sure that the production is within the limits that that determine that it's sustainable? Would you do this by assessing the efficiency of the production practices? Next. This can be done by various tools. You can look at production, and that's per unit, or just general production, where you say, okay, in this system they've increased production, and it's high enough that we are satisfied by this. For like, for example, the first column in the illustration shows production increase. Other tools that you can use are water footprint assessment. One that I think people are more familiar with is on the emissions targets and what is within required limits. Another example of a tool that assesses efficiency is how the land use the land productivity. And another one is also based on grain, for whether it's fortified or not. And the final one is on what calories are produced. And for this presentation, I focus on water footprint and the land use as efficiency indicators. Next. So for Kenya, to assess dairy production, what we usually look at is the production systems, and generally we describe Kenya in 3 agroecological zones. So we describe it as arid, semi-arid, or humid, dependent on the amount of precipitation or more on a humidity index. And we know that based on these agroecological zones, then there's dominant products. And that's why I showed beef in the previous slides on how it will grow, because we know for Kenya, the arid and semi-arid areas predominantly focus on production of beef, though there is production of dairy products for home consumption. So for this presentation, I will be looking at, I'll be highlighting dairy production in the semi-arid towards arid systems. And next. So what are the key factors of efficiency in these dairy systems? Next. These semi-arid systems, we term them as pre-commercial, as they have not been traditionally included in the dairy production systems as definitions, and have always been not highly considered when dairy production is discussed. They are generally areas of low rainfall zonation, though they have large tracts of land available for production. Usually the land that is available does not seem suitable for production of dairy because of the low rainwater availability, which makes it difficult to provide feeds to the animals for dairy, commercial dairy production. Additionally, these areas are constrained in producing in high productivity dairy activities by low access to dairy facilities and a low level of information that provided to them on the type of breeds, the diseases. They're not able to access credit facilities, and also due to the low water availability are not able to provide for the animals enough feed of good quality, so that the animals, the livestock are able to produce enough dairy for their own consumption and also to make it commercial. Next. So when we assessed the efficiency of producing milk in these pre-commercial areas, we see that there is increasing the milk yields in those semi-arid areas by improving the breeds was also associated with substantial increase in the water and land usage. The breeds that we assessed were the Frisian and the Ayrshire. And with these breeds, we note that they had the largest water and land footprints. One positive aspect that was seen in the interventions towards intensification, that when you look at the crossbreeds in this system, they seem to have a much lower water and land usage trend than the purebred Ayshires and Frisian. Next. So from this analysis, we had some basic conclusions both for farmers and for policy makers in these pre-commercial dairy regions. Next. For farmers, they were advised against upgrading to the pure breed, especially since the pure breeds had a high demand for inputs. And this is constrained, especially due to the low levels of water that are required for providing feed to ensure that an Ayrshire or Frisian pure breed is producing optimally. However, the farmers are not completely discouraged from improving their breeds, because currently the breeds are producing quite lowly, and these were mainly due to the constraints of feed production and also access to other resources, like the knowledge of what the crossbreeds are able to do, the performance of the crossbreed. Because most farmers, once you introduce dairy to them, they feel that dairy production is only efficient when you have a purebred Ayrshire, Frisian, not even Ayrshire. But so when the farmers are intent on crossbreeding, the advice is to crossbreed with the Ayrshire, which is most efficient in terms of land usage, especially in the Midlands, Midland regions of these pre-commercial agroecological zones. Another advice for farmers was to improve their breeds, as the current production with the more traditional zebus, or more in these regions, was not efficient, as it was farmers are intent on participating in improving feed, but the output of the indigenous breed is quite low. So you're not getting as efficient an output from the animal with the increased availability of feed in this lowland. So farmers were encouraged to improve their breeds with the Ayrshire, and this would make their systems more efficient, especially in the lower regions of the less humid agricultural zones. Next. For the policy and strategy implications of this, because of the heterogeneity in these agroecological zones, it's advised that implementation of policies should be focused at advising farmers more clearly on what combination of strategies would match the conditions in which they are living in and practicing production in. As we see in these areas, sometimes the strategies that are proposed to farmers were to improve their breeds completely to the very high resource demanding purebred Frisian. Yet the Ayrshire can produce quality milk and at a lower environmental cost. Also, the information that is generated by this sort of work that considers the different zones, it helps the strategy and the institutions involved in developing policies and strategies to make sure that dairy production is achieved, by the increase in dairy production is achieved, and still ensures that the increased production does not have a negative impact on the environment. Next. Thank you for listening, and I hope this was informative.
So, thank you, Dr. Bosire, for your wonderful presentation on linking dairy intensification to water and land use. So we'll kindly post your question on the chat, but at the same time, we also give each participant a maximum of 2 minutes in case you have a question. So in case you have a question, just you can raise your hand But before that, I can see we have one question from Monica for Caroline. So Monica is asking, what is the role of extension services in all of these, in the dairy intensification? So for the rest, kindly post your question on the chat, but at the same time, you're also free to raise your hand.
Okay, I'll answer the question by Monica. Extension services play a key role in disseminating this information to the farmers. For instance, in advising farmers on which crossbreed to focus on. Usually the advice comes that the perception of most dairy farmers in Kenya is that Frisian dairy breed is the best for dairy output. So the extension services would be best placed to also promote the use of the Ayrshire as a crossbreeding alternative, and also to show how, when you feed both of the animals, what is the outcome in terms of output, dairy output, in terms of the economics of it, in terms of the resources in terms of associated with water or land that will be required to manage either of the breeds. Also to encourage farmers to improve their breeds, because currently what we see is that they improve the more, I don't want to call it easier, but the more attainable aspect, which is feed, and not so much on the breed. Yet the breed is a key component of improving the overall efficiency of a dairy production unit. So the extension services would be best placed to disseminate such information and ensure farmers get the best outcomes from their practices that they choose to follow.
Thank you for the response. Just as a reminder, in case you have a question, you are free to raise your hand. Then we'll unmute you and give you a chance to contribute. Then on the chat, I can see we have two questions. There's Dr. Nehemiah Mihindo. What is the home tech for my dairy farmers? So Dr. Nehemiah Mihindo is asking, what is the home tech for my dairy farmers? Then also, we also have a question from Mary Nyasimi. How can we digitize our smallholder production systems? For instance, getting market prices or drought, flood warning quickly and efficiently.
Okay. I'll start with Dr. Nehemiah's question. So the take home for the dairy farmer is that now that it is still possible to improve your efficiency at a lower cost to you, that you do not have to invest too extensively to improve your production practices that you're currently involved in. So there's opportunity to the farmer to achieve an increased production, to increase efficiency on their farm from their current production level at not a very unattainable cost. That's I think the key message to farmers, that they do not have to go all the way to the very high end improvements to get any change on their farm.
Okay, there was also the question from Mary Nyasimi on digitalization of the smallholder production systems.
I think out there, there are various platforms. If I'm not wrong, there is MCOW, there is no, there are various platforms that are aimed at at getting this information out to farmers through a digital platform, and I think and they're able to access this on basic mobile phone. It does not have to be a smartphone. So I believe out there are various platforms that are focused at availing this information to farmers at a easily accessible format on the phone. There is, I think, radio programs and that engage with farmer organizations, or they engage with other established media that is able to disseminate the relevant information to the farmers.
So we have 3 more questions in the chat, but before that, I will give this chance to Wanjiru Kamau to ask a question.
Thank you, Dr. Kerubo, for your presentation. I have, I'm just trying to get my mind around what you have shared with us. And one of the things that I'm having a dilemma with is that you talk about intensification. Perhaps it's just a clarification. You talk about intensification, and yet this is a practice usually associated with highland areas where we have zero grazing units. But your research, you said the focus of your research was mainly around semi-arid areas. So in the context of semi-arid areas, what is intensification? Because perhaps from a laywoman's point of view, there is a lot of land and people are able to graze. So that has kind of left me a bit mixed up. Maybe you can clarify and explain and was there any research done perhaps in places like Githunguri where there's a lot of zero grazing units, and what were your findings? My second question is the breeds you as again, breeds that we get mainly with highland areas and zebus and all. So this has kind of left me a bit mixed up. And finally, when we talk about resource, for instance, if we talk about water, and how much is a zebu for every 1 or 1 liter of water that a zebu drinks? How much milk are you able to get compared?
I think we've lost you, Wanjiru.
Wanjiru, I think your connection has an issue, but Caroline, you can just proceed.
I'm happy to repeat. If you didn't hear me?
Yes, yeah. You can proceed. Kindly proceed. Hi, Wanjiru, your connection keeps breaking. So maybe you can also share on the chat. Your connection keeps breaking. You can also be able maybe just to share on the chat, because we can't hear you. So we have 4.
Okay.
I think I can answer her first question at least, because that one at least we had it. So in terms of the the systems, the intensification means farmers get more involved in providing not just grazing, because that's what is associated with the intensive systems in this system, in these less humid regions. So they are able to provide additional feeds, which are what is required for the animal, for the livestock to produce a higher production of the dairy of milk. So this would include such things as improved, more drought-resistant forages and feeds and forages, for example, like bracharia. So introduction of cultivated feeds, that's what would indicate that a system is moving more towards the intensification. Additionally, changing of the breed more from the more zebu to or whatever is the indigenous breed to a more higher dairy producing animal, which now will not require to move around. They can graze, but it wouldn't be as extensive as before. So that's the indication of intensification. And a comparison, the humid highlands have been studied very extensively. Those ones have, they are more the zero grazing, and animals are locked up in the stalls, and it's more cut and carry. So in these systems, it's different from the semi-arid areas in that they are land scarce, but water. They're not water scarce. Though water in the context of animal feed is more what is converted in from rain and maybe irrigation into the feed, and not just the water that we see, that we consider as the one we wash the stalls, or the one we provide drinking water for the animals. So that's the bigger difference between the humid system and the semi-arid system.
So we have 4 more questions on the chat. But before that, we'd like to give anyone who wants to share a bit of his experience on dairy intensification. So maybe we want to give someone 2 minutes. Anyone who wants to share a bit of on his or her experience on dairy intensification, just kindly raise your hand. Then you can be able to unmute you to share your experiences. So in case you want to share your experiences, kindly unmute, then you can be able to share. So we have 4 questions on the chat. The first one, how to harmonize technology transfer, from Jordan Nganga, how to harmonize technology transfer. Then also from Rebecca Tanui, on most of smallholder farmers have challenges of getting quality livestock feeds. Is there a challenge in getting the right animal feeds? The challenge getting the right animal feeds. Then from Zipporah, how can we manage the desired breeds without using agrochemicals in control of parasites? How best can we manage the desired breeds without using agrochemicals in control of parasites? And also issues around getting quality feeds and how to harmonize technology transfer. So those 3 questions. In the meantime, in case you want to share your experiences in dairy intensification, kindly raise your hand, then we'll be able to unmute you so that you can be able to share your experiences. So back to you, Caroline.
Okay. So let me start with the challenges of feeds. So most of the smallholder farmers, yes, are unable to access feeds because unless they are, usually this is a challenge where a farmer is intending to commercialize their their production. In the areas that the focus of the presentation is usually they do not have a big challenge they do have a challenge with maintaining the extensive systems and providing feed to the animals through management of their pastures. When now we move towards trying to introduce cultivate much which have good yields in these areas and do not require a lot of precipitation to grow. So there is a challenge of providing the right feeds to the animals, especially if you're intensifying. And one approach is to provide the farmers with improved feed types, which is, for example, like the bracharia, which has been developed recently and is already in the market as seeds, and it has passed as in certification and is available for sale now to farmers. So it's to encourage them, especially in these areas, to plant such feed crops, which would enhance their production output. And also another intervention for them to get the right feed for the animal is to manage their pastures as effectively to manage pastures efficiently, especially in these areas where they are not land scarce. So reseeding and planting grasses that they can harvest and store in the seasons of plenty, and now provide to the animals in the seasons of scarcity. So how best to manage the desired breed? Not very much an agro, I'm not a veterinary, but what I would think is to try and have an in-between for the breeds, where you get the best of the indigenous breeds and the best of the exotic breeds, the purebred Ashers and Frisian, which is what we had proposed to the farmers, that you from a crossbreed of especially Asher in these semi-arid areas, you would be able to get an animal that is producing very efficiently for your system. And these ones are usually, they have a high tolerance. The crossbreeds have a better tolerance to the diseases and stresses of this sort of system, and would then mean less application of the agrochemicals to the animals. How best to harmonize technology transfer? I think we would look maybe through developing a system where the technologies can be assessed for which technologies are best applied in each area, and then classified and placed in sort of toolkits for each agroecological zone, for example, and then those are what are promoted in as the technologies that will be promoted in the zones through maybe a mechanism that's in place in those zones.
Thank you for that. So we still have two more questions from Emmanuel and also Monica. But before that, I think Wanjiru Kamau had something. So Wanjiru Kamau, maybe we can be able to share. Then also, I don't know if either Gideon or Raymond would like to share their experience. But first, Wanjiru, I think you had something to share. Okay, so there's a question from Emmanuel on how did you assess agricultural good practice with regard to sustainability, climate change responsiveness, and the potentials for scaling up in your project? How did you assess agricultural good practices with regard to sustainability, climate change responsiveness, and the potential for scaling up in your project? Then from Monica, are there ways or techniques that can be applied to help cattle keepers in ASAL areas improve on their animal feeds?
Okay, so to Emmanuel, we have not assessed the potential for scaling up in the project. This is being done right now as a post, I think, end of project assessment of where will it go next. So in regards, good practice in regards to sustainability, it was done through a scenario analysis. So you for each of the systems, you have, which is the, under scenarios of just producing with the local breed, with the crossbreed, and with the pure breed. So which is the best practice, and then that's what gave us the conclusion that Ayrshire performs much better environmentally than the Frisian in these semi-arid areas. So it also that would also link, I think, to the climate change responsiveness, where if the areas are projected to becoming more drier, so what would be the implications for improving the breeds towards intensification? Would it be that the farmers should just remain with their indigenous breeds, or focus on increasing or improving their breeds? So the conclusion would responsive. It would be on whether the additional assessment, I think, that we did not do would be on whether the introduced would be able to continue providing enough feed for the animals at the good yield levels that are projected for it, even when the situation becomes drier. So that would mean either advising for different types of feed that are more water stress tolerant, because the animals as crossbreeds, I think, are quite, have been assessed to be the optimal combination, not optimal, the optimal breeds as a crossbreed. That's the optimal breed for providing milk outputs that can be commercialized. If yeah, so a combination of crossbreeds and good yielding feed would be the assessment of what is a good practice for these regions in terms of climate change responsiveness. Okay, and then are there ways that can be applied? Yes. So there are ways to improve the feed for cattle keepers in these ASALs, and I alluded to them, which was good pasture management, because it's not always all the time that we would advise for crop feed production, as the amount of rainfall is not always predictable. And also in these same areas is where we have the use of these same resources for dairy production by wild animals. So there we introduce also an aspect of competition for other activities. So the advice would be on maintaining the pasture to a level that is able to maintain the animal feed requirements, and also for other activities that require, like for wildlife conservation that is also practiced in these areas.
So there's one more question from Lucy Njuguna. In the scenarios, did you also consider the changing environmental conditions? For instance, although these breeds seem efficient, they might be susceptible to diseases.
Yes, I'm not sure about the environmental conditions and disease, but by having crossbreeds, you're optimizing on the positive qualities of the more indigenous breeds that are usually in the area, because these are able to withstand higher stresses, especially of less feed available to them. And also because farmers generally do not demand as much from their local breeds, then it ensures that the animals are producing optimally for the desire of the farmer. But when we consider commercializing, that means farmers need to improve their animals, making the animal more efficient, which means improving the breed from the zebu towards crossbred animal. So I think the optimal production practice is to have a crossbred animal there, which is less susceptible to disease and able to deal with the changing resource conditions and maybe disease, because they have, with time, their genetics has been able to develop resistance to some of these diseases.
Okay, thank you for that. Time is not on our side. So as we conclude, we just have one more final activity. So how are you feeling right now? We've shared the link on the chat. There's a link on the chat. Just click on the link. How are you feeling right now? So you can just click on that link, then you can be able to add. But at the same time, if you're using your phone, just go to semiarid.com, then you'll input the code 621-653. So I think we'll just spend the next 1 minute. You can be able to join in the next 1 minute. Just share your thoughts after the 1 hour dialogue. How are you feeling right now? So we have good. Just click on the link that we've shared on the chat. Better informed on dairy, motivated, we have good, better informed on dairy, knowledgeable, great, rejuvenated, so far majority feel good, informed, knowledgeable, motivated. So majority of us are feeling great, empowered on dairy farming, better informed on dairy, enlightened, knowledgeable, informed, good, great, thanks, motivated, So I'll share a bit on fourth dialogue. So on 1st September, we'll have our fourth dialogue where we'll be able to hear from Hannah Kigamba. So she'll take us through engaging the youth in food system transformation, which actors are involved and what needs to be done to make food systems sustainable. So kindly join us on 1st September during our fourth dialogue, the same time at 2:30 to 3:30, where we look at engaging the youth in food system transformation, which actors are involved and what needs to be done to make food system sustainable. So hopefully you'll be able to join us. So first, maybe Caroline can be able to share your final comments before you conclude.
Thank you for the opportunity to make the presentation. I hope the video at least gave an idea of what people perceive as a water and land footprint, that the big numbers that are usually mentioned around, and I think when Jiro had alluded to it, that how if that one kilo of milk that is produced by a cow in humid systems and in arid systems, if they're equivalent, that they are not equivalent, they're not equal, but they're equivalent, and that there is also quite some improvements that can be made in the areas that are not considered good for dairy, that they are an option to meet our future demands for milk, especially for Kenya.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Caroline. So in case you're interested in either presenting or being a moderator in subsequent dialogues, kindly go to the link that we've shared on the chat. You can be able to add your details. So thank you all for joining us today. I think we'll just conclude our dialogue for today. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And do all enjoy your afternoon.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.